Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with the On Wander Lane Mini Quilt Club tutorial where I unpack how do you make these darling little displays from start to finish. If you're not in our club already, we have some limited space remaining, and after watching this, you're going to want to jump in. Look at all these around here. They're all on their own stands, but just a reminder, you only need one stand because you get to change that out each month. And I know what that's like. My workspace is actually, there's a lot going on. I have just a small area, so if you want to be changing just a little bit of decoration in your office space, how fun to have something right there on your desk with you. As you know, prefused laser cut applique, meaning you don't need to be tracing and cutting all those shapes. We're doing that for you. So maximum fun with that tedious work. You don't need to worry about that. Behind me, this is the On Wander Lane wall hanging series we've done. We had launched that as a club. That club has since sold out, but we do have some limited kits available. We're doing monthly tutorials on that, mostly me, sometimes Tammy though, coming up. So be sure to check that out as well. How nice to have a coordinating project. Maybe you can do both. So when you get your kit, as I said, it'll have everything included except just a little bit of fusible fleece or batting. We all have scraps of that in our sewing room. You'll need just a small piece, about 8 by 8. But the rest of that is in your kit. And of course, we love that prefuse laser cut applique. This is the thread set we'll be using all throughout this series. So if you didn't pick that up when you got your spot in the club, or maybe you're about to get your spot in the club, be sure to pick up that thread. It's 50 weight sulky. Those are all the colors for all 12 designs. And even beyond this series, how nice to have some beautiful thread. So when you want to do a little bit of applique for something completely different, you already have that in your sewing room. So with our On Wander Lane patterns, Nancy has done a great job of giving us both reverse for fusible applique and a layout diagram. If you are in our club, you can skip that reverse for fusible applique because you're not tracing. We've done that for you in all the cutting. We'll be using the diagram here in conjunction with the laser shapes that are in your kit. So our first step is to be able to pre-assemble. We love being able to do that. Back in the day, before all of this technology existed, light boxes, applique mats, I had my background, I had a photograph, and usually I only had a reverse for fusible applique drawing, and I now cutting, tracing, cutting, that arrangement, guessing visually, where does this go? That's all over with. So how we're going to use our light box in conjunction with our applique mat with our layout diagram is what I'm going to be showing you now. Nancy put multiple blocks on one big sheet here. So you can, if you can either cut this out, or if you're like, I don't really like cutting my diagram, I understand that. We're just going to simply set that inside here and lay our design down. And this is the one that we will be doing today. So we have our iron is on a medium heat. This is the target. I just printed that out so I know where I'm headed. And let's just look at that, and we can look at our diagram, or our actual mini quilt here, and you can see that, of course, the beak is behind the bird's behind the wing. So you'll just need to visualize which piece is going down first. And I always recommend, before you place the applique mat or applique pressing sheet, whatever you'll be using, before you place that on top, which begins to restrict our view, go ahead and figure out, per the image in the book, which piece is going to go down first, followed by the next piece and the next piece. And as we look at this here, notice how this stem is traveling all the way into the seam allowance. So when you get your pieces, this would definitely be the first piece that went down. Just give a good strong crease, and that paper will release. That's exposing the fabric with a little bit of that glue on the back. Now, in order to be able to see through this better, we're going to reduce the lights in the studio And I'll begin to put my applique mat down, and the first pieces will be starting to come in as we build our site picture. Iron's heating up to medium. Once we have everything in place, we'll move that over and we'll fuse everything together, so that'll be moving on to our background fabric as one unit. It's an incredible process. So we'll just draw the lights down just a little bit so it's a little bit easier for you to see the process. So I have the sequence is light box, placement diagram, the applique mat, and now we begin to lay the shapes out. I love that this applique mat is sticky. There's a tackiness to it, which helps lock everything in. Now, I can see from, I'll just use this so it's easier to reference. That piece needs to go down, followed by this piece, and this piece, and then the bird. So let's put this in the back. I'll just start to build it. I'll use my Gypsy Quilter tweezers. They really come in handy. It's like another pair of hands, especially when you start working with some of the smaller shapes that are coming up. Now this piece right here, do you see how there's really no contact? This piece shouldn't go down now because there's no overlap. So I'll wait on that one. But let's check everything else. Make sure everything's as we like it. Once you're happy, we move everything over with a medium heat and just let that iron sit straight down because I don't want to have any lateral movement. Let it cool down for just a little while, and if you're really impatient, you can blow on it. I have done all the things. Once you feel like you're ready to go, or actually I'll just put it off to the side. Let me just do that so I'm not tempted. This is our background here. I'll turn this off for just a second. Notice that the background has some very specific orientation. This is the On Wonderlane fabrics. When you get your fabric, you'll have a piece that's big enough that you can be very intentional about getting your ruler out and making sure that you're lining up, right? Get a leaf, get a spot where you're like, okay, I'm on that side of the leaf every time. You make your cut, and then you begin to measure. That way, everything is just straight as can be. When you get ready to applique to the background, of course, you can see that this is the right way, and this would not be the right way because everything's going downward. So this is what we call a directional fabric that we fussy cut. Fussy cut meaning being very intentional about alignment. We do that with plaids, ginghams, and directional fabrics like this. Okay, our design should be cooled down now, and this is the magic. And I'm telling you, this never gets old for me. I just think this technology is so fun. It takes the stress out of applique, and did I get it right? Is the site picture right? And now it's just dead on. It's incredible. So the applique mat has done its work. Now, when we look at this here, we'll go back to, I'm laying my background fabric right around that box. That frame is our size of our background. Now we go back, put everything back where we had it before, except it was on the applique mat. Get everything exactly where you want it. That other piece comes into play now. And now, once again, we will iron this down, but now to the background. So let's take this with us, being careful not to move anything. And once again, just put the iron down, 1 potato. We're from Idaho, right? We do the potato thing here, 2 potatoes. I count to about 5, 6. That's good. And then there, you know, a funny story. As a pilot, and I've traveled all around the country, it's funny when people say, where are you from? Idaho. Oh, the potatoes. So we're well known for that. What's your state known for? I'm from Michigan originally. Cherries, we are known for that. And a lot of snow. I think we're very known for that too. Okay, once that is all ironed down, now what I'll do is I'll clean all this up. We'll get the studio lights back up and we can talk about, once you have this down, now what do we do? I'll be right back. So we're back with our block, and if you're like me, sometimes I have to quilt in stages. So many times I don't get to complete a project all at once. If that's you and you want to put your block away, we do have some of our project bags from June Taylor. They're awesome. If you're in a block of the month club, or you're like me, can't get it all done at one time. I don't want to wonder where this thing is. I don't want to wonder if the dog got a hold of it. Open that up, in goes the block, in goes the pattern, or whatever you're working on. Project bags are fun to make, and you can use them over and over again, and they're awesome for retreats. Awesome for retreats, especially mountain retreats. It can be kind of dusty. Once we have our block done, we opted to wait and not stitch down the applique yet. That gave us a nice embossed look. Let me see if you can see this from the back here. If you want that kind of chiseled look, then wait too. But if you're like, nope, I want those shapes down right now, go ahead and choose your favorite coordinating thread. A super nonstick size 80 needle is perfect. The super nonstick is engineered specifically for fusible products, fusible applique of any type. I do like that chiseled look, so I'm going to wait. So that means now what I'll be doing is adding our borders. So be sure to cut your borders to the exact size, and of course right side together, pinning top and bottom, 1/4 inch seam allowance, no big surprise there. And we'll be doing that on both sides. You could really piece the borders together with a white or gray throughout this entire club. It's really just for the applique that you use those colored thread, but of course you could always use that colored thread right now, pink, white, whatever you want to do. Let's go ahead and stitch that on. I do have a seam guide keeping me true to my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's press to the outside. We can bring our heat up to a full hot now that we're doing our borders. And notice that stem here is caught in the seam allowance. I love that. All nice and secure. Okay. Next, of course, is our top and bottom borders. No mystery there. Right side together, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'll go do that. It'll be pressed to the outside, and then we can talk about now what are we doing. So the borders are sewn on, and before we put any fusible fleece or backing on, we are going to do a little bit of embroidery here. There are some embroidery stitches throughout our series, and I'll show you not only the stitches here, but the other stitches as well that you can expect, so you can watch this one video to be able to know how to do the embroidery. For sure, we want to take advantage of the words here on the diagram, as well as the legs, and draw them on now with our light box. So much simpler. That's why we have our light box. Let's turn that back on. So I see my words. I'm going to use a temporary marking tool. This is a friction pen, and just trace on my words. We're going to zoom in on the embroidery. You can see on this one we have a back stitch here, but we have other stitches on some of the other projects as well. We have some lazy daisies. We have French knots for the kitty. We have a little satin stitch for the nose. And we have a few other stitches that I want to make sure I cover that. So no matter what month you're in, you can refer back to this video and I'll have covered whatever embroidery stitches there are. So I'll get my DMC floss, that's included in your first shipment, and I get 2 strands, and I like to use my Richard Hemming needles, and we'll get started here in just a moment. So for my demonstration, I'll just be doing this with a darker thread on white. It's easier for you to see that. The first one will just be a back stitch, just like we've done here. In fact, I can draw the S on here. Richard Hemming needle, or whatever needle you like to use, embroidery floss. I have a knot. I'm coming up from beneath. And it's harder to start on a curve, and that's okay. Whenever we're going around a turn, we need to take shorter stitches. Come up. And we go back to where we came from. If you can get a back stitch around a corner, you'll have no problem on the straightaway coming up. Just like that. Always going back to where you came from. The goal is to split that line with the needle. I think that's one of the things I like about the Richard Hemming size 4. It's just that perfect blend of really sharp to pierce that line, but the eye of the needle is big enough to hold 2 to 3 strands of embroidery floss with no problem. That's how you do a back stitch. Really, really easy, foundational for certain. With any hand embroidery project, you almost always have some level of a back stitch somewhere in a project, and sometimes a lot of it. And then you just continue around. That's a back stitch. Out, come back. And of course, tying off is always just going back through where you came from. Shallow, looping through a couple times to tie off. And then you would cut your thread. Now we'll keep going because I want to be able to cover French knots. That's what's happening here with our little kitty. We come up. It's going to be easier for you to see it if I have it down on the table. If you're right-handed, the flossel's off to the left, the needle's in the front. You can go around 1 time or 2 times, depending on the size of the knot. I'll go around 2, going right back down in the hole I had come up in. Notice I'm trapping that and then letting it go at the last moment. If you're like, oh, that's too small, I want more bulk, you can add either more strands of embroidery floss or wrap around more times. Let's say we do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pivot down. Slide those down. Push it through. Notice I'm trapping this on the left. Only let go in the end. And you can see now it is definitely a bigger knot. That's the French knot. Moving on to a running stitch. A running stitch is this stitch here that the butterfly has. It's a lot of fun. You can certainly, if you want to draw a running stitch on, you can do that, or just go for it. One of the reasons it's a really fun stitch is it happens quickly. As we come up, we can rock the needle down and right back up and down and right back up. And you can actually get a lot done at one time. And I just kind of smooth it out. You can see how that's kind of an old-fashioned looking stitch. I've always thought it was very charming. Just smooth it out, and down you go. Fun. A lot of fun. Happens quickly. Very fun. Our next stitch will be a lazy daisy. That's what this is right here. So as we look at this, we would back stitch this all the way to the top, and we would do our French knots on the way, excuse me, lazy daisies. So let's just pretend we want to do one here. How I like to do a lazy daisy is I come up and I do the loop toward myself. I trap that with my thumb, go right back down where you came up from, and decide, okay, I think that's about there. Maybe it's about there. Of course, we'd be using green. If you ever it starts to get kind of twisted, I drop my needle, let it untwist, and then go back down. Let me show you that again. I feel like my fingers were kind of in the way on that one. Let's do another one here. Come on up, trap it, go back down, set your distance. Hop over the other side. That's a lazy daisy. And again, you tie off. Satin stitch. So let's look at this real quick. The nose here of the kitty and a little bit on the beak right there. So a satin stitch is best accomplished when you backstitch the shape first, and then you're filling in with very close stitches on the shape. So let me give you, I'll just do that nose. Let's do the nose. So let's just change thread so it looks just like the kitty. I'm just going to cut this. I'm not even going to tie it off. Okay. So with a satin stitch, again, we kind of outline that. I would take a smaller stitch, but just for time's sake, I'm just going to outline this with stitches and then fill in. I can see I need some thread magic here. Thread magic is a thread conditioner. Sometimes, and it's super dry in Idaho, sometimes thread just gets a mind of its own. Having the conditioner really almost moisturizes it, creates a slickness to this, reducing breakage, tangling. So when you're starting to feel or even hear that resistance, that's a great time to grab for your thread magic. Not planned, but here we go. That's why I keep it handy on set with me. Okay. Let's finish outlining our shape. Oh, I just have too long of a tail now. There we go. So much smoother. Now that we have the shape, now we begin to come inside. This is just like, coloring inside the lines. Next to it. And next to it. See how it starts to fill in? Really fun. All the way across. almost there. That, and one more after this, right in that corner, right there. And that's how you do a satin stitch. And of course, you're just going back. You have a lot to go through now in the back, right? To go ahead and tie off. All right, I will get cleaned up here, clean off our embroidery as we move on to now preparing our backing and a little bit of a tiny hanging sleeve. Now I know it's sometimes not convenient to be watching a video, so you can always grab the Embroidery and Crazy Quilt Stitch Tool by Judith Baker. This is just an invaluable guide that has over 180 stitches, including tips for needles, thread, ribbon, and more. And so if you want to completely change the embroidery to not even be anything I just showed you, how fun to personalize your project that way. So we will pretend that our embroidery is done in our project so we can keep going. The next step would be some fusible fleece or a piece of batting. I love fusible fleece because it attaches to the project. And to cut that out, we're just going to iron that down. Make sure, I'm going to iron that from the back even here. Iron that down, and the backing, as I said, there's no traditional binding. How nice, right? Binding on a project this small would be a lot of work. So Nancy has a pretty ingenious way to prepare a little tiny hanging sleeve on the back, as well as how to put the backing and attach the front. So once that's down, get that heating back up here. Let me just show you the back here. We have a hanging sleeve, and this is a split display. We're just going to create a little bit of a valley there, and how we'll do that. So first thing we'll do is we have our small piece of fabric that's going to be our hanging sleeve on the back. With right side together, we're just sewing a 1/4 inch on either end. Let me show you that real quick. We just did that ahead of time. And we're just going to clip just a little bit and turn, just trimming this right side out. And that's where I love my point turner. Helps me out big time. Right in those corners where my fingers just don't go. And press. It's a really ingenious thing she's come up with, making it so easy to create these. And we'll press. Then on your backing fabric, again included in your kit, we've just drawn a line at the midpoint. You can just measure that, draw the midpoint. You could certainly, if you felt compelled to have it exactly centered, do that and do this to find the perfect midpoint, if you're inclined, and pin. Now, and this is the raw edge, that's the folded edge, and we'll sew with an 1/8 of an inch just along this top. So we'll sew an 1/8 of an inch here to here. Then we'll come back and sew directly on this line. Then we'll sew very close to that edge. Okay, now we'll be sewing right close to that very edge there. And if we want to iron away our friction pen line, it's all gone. So that's what's creating the valley back here. Right in here is where that hanger is going to slip in. This is going to be our seam allowance. So let's look at this now. We have our front, we have our back. We will pin in the corners. I'm going to leave my opening across the bottom. In fact, I'm going to mark that. I am famous for forgetting that. And next thing you know, and I'm seam ripping, I'm going to leave a couple inch opening to be able to get that turned through. Now you will be sewing that by hand. If you didn't want to sew that by hand, you could come back and top quilt this all the way around. Certainly your choice. We chose to top stitch ours closed. So the bigger the opening you leave, the more hand sewing you'll do. I'll pin it all the way around. Sew, leaving that opening. Make sure you do back stitch when you first start, and when you come back at your ending point, back stitch again. There'll be tension as we begin to turn the project through at that location. Before we turn it through, it is helpful to clip those corners, helping us to get them nice and 90 degrees. And here we start to turn the project through. Our point turner is definitely going to be helpful getting those corners pushed out. Definitely one of those notions that is such a must-have. Get everything nice and pressed out. Do that corner again. That opening just wants to close. How nice is that? Love it. Thank you very much. We'll take it. Oh, this is cute. I can kind of roll that flat. Get that exactly where you want it. There's our hanging sleeve on the back. Okay, to whip stitch that closed, I just grabbed pink thread. So one of the things that is one of my favorite ways to create a loop and not have a knot is this pink thread is long, twice as long as you would think. Bring up both the beginning and the end. Thread that through, and now I have a loop down here instead of a knot, which is lovely. It's a nice, feels secure to not have a knot. A loop's not coming undone. I just go in shallow, and when I come back up through this loop, I'm ready to go. And you're just closing this, trying to stay as much on the inside and be as discreet as you can. It's just a slow process, but there's not that much of it to do. So I'm just picking up the inside of this side, then the inside of that side, opposite one, and adding in a stitch. I tend to work at a diagonal. Seems to go a little quicker. You get the idea. It's very subtle, meant to be discreet so that once it's done, you don't notice it. And you'd finish that off, just simply tie and kind of bury the knot inside here. Your other option for completing this, closing this, is again, if you just don't even want to do that hand sewing and you want to have an 1/8 of an inch stitch all the way around, that would give that a lovely finished stitch. Just make sure it's quite shallow, an 1/8 of an inch, because you need to make sure you're leaving your hanging sleeve wide open for that to go in. Once you've done that, and again, we're pretending like all embroidery is here, I would go in then and get my top quilting done. Stitching of your choice. Here's again what we've done. We just did a straight stitch around all of that. You could do decorative stitching or anything you want. And we've included a button in your kit as well. Great for your black thread that's in your thread set to just apply that there. And notice mine is gone because, of course, I've ironed that with heat. You could also put that on, mark that with a permanent marker. But gosh, you can see where you want that to go. Just simply apply that, and you are ready to display your project. And that is how all of the projects will be going together each month. So you can see that putting together these little mini quilts is a lot of fun, especially with the prefused laser cut applique. This definitely makes this almost a half-day project, and you have something lovely to display or maybe give as a gift. If you're not already in the club, get your spot, and if you are, great job. Many more Block of the Months and clubs coming your way. If you haven't already subscribed, do that now. Let your friends know. So much is on the horizon. Our best days are still ahead of us, and you want to be a part of everything happening here at Shabby Fabrics. I'll see you soon on another video.